Where you folks parked your vehicles this morning, there was a prison camp. In fact, it was the first open prison in New Zealand. And the prisoners that were sent to that camp, well, it was their job to clear that bush and scrub out of the way and prepare the land for the planting of trees. In fact, most of the forests that you folks see between Rotorua and Taupo, including this one in front of you, were originally started using prison labour. And it was a gang of those prisoners that actually came across this clearing. But again, what they saw 100 or so years ago is not what you're seeing now. At that time, in this rock formation, all that was here was a large, clear, hot water spring with a little ledge about so high around her. You get a pretty good idea of what you would have looked like then, but on a much smaller scale, if you look across at that rock formation over there. Now, if you look very carefully, just on the bush line and shadow at the moment, you'll see a scrubby-looking bush literally growing out of the rock. Now, that's Manuka, or New Zealand tea tree, and round its base, there's another little ledge which marks the edge of what was then another hot spring. Now, 100 years ago, prison life in New Zealand was pretty primitive. Those prisoners were over half a day's ride by horseback from Rotorua. They didn't have access to any of the luxuries of life, and they certainly didn't have access to constant hot water. And some of them thought it would be a very clever idea to bring the camp's dirty washing down to this large hot water spring here. That would save them the bother of having to gather firewood to boil water. So one morning, a group of them were down here, busy dipping their dirty clothes into this hot water spring. They pulled them out, scrubbed them up with some soap, dipped them back in to rinse them off, and got one heck of a fright. What actually happened was this hot spring erupted. Their washing disappeared that way, and they disappeared that way. But we now know that what actually happened was that soap acted a trigger. It allowed the superheated steam and water to force its way up through those cooler levels and out through the top in an eruption. And that's what we're going to do this morning. But instead of using soap, we now use a product that's been chemically engineered called surfactant to do exactly the same thing, but to leave nothing behind in the environment. And once I put it into the vent of the geyser, if all goes to plan, in just a few moments, we should see some bubbles at the top of the vent here. As that hot water comes through, all this will be pushed out, and we'll see the water start to surge as she builds up into that first full eruption.
See over us?
Yeah, Eric.
Thank you.
Now, to get from something that looked like that to this shape, what actually happened was those same prisoners piled rocks around the edge and tried to make a chimney. And the reason for doing that was for their own entertainment. In those days, they didn't have TVs or any of that sort of gear. They had to make their own fun. By building that chimney, it forced the water into a narrower opening. That created a stronger jet of water and sent their clothes even higher. But then Mother Nature came along. And she actually gave her this cone shape and the white mantle that you are seeing now, and she's still doing it using a mineral called silica. Now that's in the geyser water. So each time there's an eruption, water shoots up into the air, falls over this area where it's the wind and the sun that evaporates the water and leaves behind that mineral, which has given her this shape and this colour. The geyser is named after Lady Constance Knox. Now, quite honestly, in New Zealand history, she wasn't very important, but her father was. He was a gentleman called Lord Ranfurly and was the 15th Governor-General of New Zealand. And in May of 1903, he came out here with his family to see how that prison camp was getting on. To mark the occasion of that visit, his daughter christened the geyser. Her name was Lady Knox, and that's how the association came about. Quick bit of geology about the geyser. She's about 150 years old. The reservoir below her, part of which runs underneath you folks, holds about 30,000 litres of water. She can play for up to 1 hour, and she can hit heights of between 10 and 20 metres. But how high she does go and how long she stays there for is totally dependent on the amount of water in that reservoir below her. So take your photos as she builds up into this first full eruption, because there's no guarantee she's going to hit that height again in her cycle. And just quickly, you can now find geysers in 3 main areas in the world. The largest cluster is in Yellowstone National Park in the United States. Another big grouping at a place called Kamchatka in Russia, and a further cluster in Iceland. And it's actually Iceland that gives us the word geyser. And in English, it simply means to gush forth. Now down here, we do not call these geezers, okay? A geezer to us is a 2-legged elderly gentleman, not one of these. It might be interesting to know that around about the 1850s, it was estimated there were over 130 active geysers in this region. By 1970, for various reasons, that had reduced to just about 15. So it's quite a unique opportunity to see a geyser eruption. Take plenty of photos. You've got a couple of minutes yet, and enjoy your day. Thank you.